Who?
Goldilocks is the three bears. She doesn't disappear.
Three Bears, isn't it? Yeah, which is the one with the Prince Charming.
That's Sleeping Beauty.
Yes.
Sleeping Beauty has 100 years of
Sleeping
sleep.
Beauty's the one that's woken up. No, the one that...
Yeah, but who disappears?
Who turns into a pumpkin at night?
Oh, that's Cinderella. But she doesn't turn into a pumpkin. Her carriage turns back into a pumpkin.
That's right. But then all her clothes turn into rags.
You've been reading some bonkers version of that where Cinderella becomes a vegetable at the end.
Anyway, I'll do my introductions. Yeah. I'm going to leave this in the video. Hello, Steelers, and welcome. Hello, Steelers, and welcome to this another very special interview video. I've got Joe Bilton, the master of terrain, here with me on the left or right of the screen, whichever it is. You may have seen some of Joe's work on the internet. If you've been to Salute, you've certainly seen it, because for the last few years, Joe has had massive tables full of amazing terrain at Salute for some games. We're going to talk about those later on, aren't we, Joe? But he's also done some Lardy Games days, set his own up as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and has featured in WSS magazine as well. Is there anything else I'm missing out there, Joe, from your biography?
No, I think that's essentially the highlights.
Good stuff. I'm pretty excited about this because Joe is one of my muses for scenery and for terrain. I always look at him for inspiration, so I'm hoping to get some good ideas in this chat that we're going to have. We kind of want to talk a little bit about history as well, you know, how that fits in. We're going to talk a bit about, hopefully he's going to give us some hints and tips as well as to how to get some better looking terrain on the table. So I guess without further ado, let's dive straight in, Joe, and we'll go straight to you. Just give me your background, really, in where you come from with scenery making. I mean, I don't need to know your background in wargaming because it's probably in my life. Everybody else.
Well, I first began wargaming when I was. So I've wargamed for about 6 years, and I jumped into the scenery terrain stuff like essentially immediately, mainly because it was seeing inspirational tables and terrain, like pictures and videos on the internet of those sort of tables, that made me think about trying it, because I'm quite a visual person and I like, I like to feel immersed in things, right? So that's quite important. So it was seeing videos that got me into wargaming, and I thought those tables I could do that. That's quite fun to do, you know. And so from the start, I sort of jumped into trying to make immersive. Now my first tables were rubbish, right? And that's, you know, I mean, I look at them now and I'm like, oh, I can't use that building because, you know, sort of thing, right? But that's the process, right? That's the learning process, and you try things out and you experiment with things and stuff. But there was quite a crucial, I guess, push in terms of me going down the sort of do big display table sort of route was Oozing Lard, which is a lard day that was organised by Ali Campbell, and it's held in Luton, in Bedford. And he had said to me, I've been wargaming a couple of years, and he said to me, would you want to run a big table, like a sort of, you know, like I'll give you a double length table sort of thing. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So then that pushed me to really do the best I could with the terrain, and sort of approach it with like, well, how would I make this modular? Because I haven't got storage for like a permanent table, but you know, how can I make it look impressive and everything, and decent size, and how can I do the best I can, because I'm trying to make this into a nice looking table. And that then gave me a lot of skills, you know, sort of like practice those skills in the first place, and also got me liking big tables. So now whenever I start a new theatre or a new table type, my goal is always to do enough terrain to do like a 5x15 sort of length table. Right. So I always, if I haven't got enough stuff to do that, I think that it's not complete until I've got enough stuff to put on a big table, because I like putting on big tables. That 6x4 feels a tiny table now. Yeah.
That's a 5x15 foot, is it? Not meters.
Yes. Not meters, no.
Not meters.
Kilometers. This is I do 1-to-1 games. Yeah. But, Yes, in feet.
Yeah, of course. But your day job is almost similar, though,
It's
isn't it? You're
related.
like
Yeah, my day job
designing.
is I make maps for games like D&D and
Mm,
Pathfinder and stuff. So I make them in Photoshop. I have a company called Heroic Maps, and I've done that for it'll be 12 years this summer.
wow.
And that started as a part-time job while I was a teacher. I used to be a science teacher, and then about 7 years ago, I went full-time with the map making. And so one benefit there is I work at home, so I have plenty of time to I make up a tea, and I in that 10 minutes quickly get distracted and like add some polyfillers or something. But it also means that a lot of my day job, which is looking at like observing surfaces like flagstones and wood and layouts of locations. So if I do like a
Yeah,
map of a town or a map of a city or something, that I'm thinking about color palettes for viewing the maps, because obviously on a map, a D&D map, you're viewing the whole town in one go from above. And so
yeah,
considering how the rooftop colors match together with the paving, because you're seeing it all at the same time,
yeah,
unlike in real life when you're on ground level, you don't see all the rooftops at the same time. So the color palettes matter so much. When you see from above, things jar if they're not sort of sitting together. So that that approach with viewing maps as whole view objects and
yeah,
balancing things between them, and then how those services weather and those sort of things, that segues really nicely into wargaming, because then essentially these are I'm doing maps, but they're 3D, and so but the same logic applies to layouts and color palettes and like the saturation levels of things.
yeah. Oh, you're sticking with that a little bit then. I mean, how did you get into the map making in the first place? So it's part
It
time
was
in
it
it.
was it was it was it was I was I had a nostalgia moment, and I thought, oh, I remember Hero Quest. Right, Hero Quest was a great game, right? And I had it when I was
Yeah,
about 10 or 11.
I
And
got
I
a
was like,
copy
oh,
of it for my birthday for my 50th.
the
Somebody
new
found
one
it.
or the original one?
The original.
It's so good.
Oh,
The miniatures are
yeah,
classic. Like everyone
yeah,
like will go, oh yeah, Hero Quest is brilliant, right? So we had that. We bought a copy on eBay, and we played it to death. And I was like, well, maybe I should make some expansion boards out of polystyrene, right? So we can
okay.
different dungeons and things. So I started
Yeah.
making these things out of like 20 mil um, polystyrene and stuff, right? They were very crude. They were also massive, right? And they were stored under the bed in these massive boxes, and they a bit crappily painted and stuff, but they were just a big storage issue. And my
Right.
wife said to me, she went, "You can't keep storing all this crap under the bed. It's taking up boxes and boxes of stuff." All right. She's like, "Why don't you just draw it in Photoshop, right, and print them, get them printed, onto cardboard or whatever stuff, and just use those, right?" I was like, that works. I have used Photoshop for quite a lot for hobby stuff, because I used to do aircraft skins for Iltu Stemovic a lot. So I used Photoshop lots. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. And I made a couple of these things. And to cover the printing costs, we thought we'd stick them onto Drive-Through RPG. And, if anyone buys them, we sell one or two, then that covers the printing costs. So it's no loss to me. But then people actually liked them, and people started buying them in decent numbers. And so
Right.
then in the evenings and the weekends, I would do some more all the first like 20 maps or so were all designed around the idea of being like Hero Quest compliant maps. So they didn't have
Right.
doors on them. They had the same
Right.
sort of grid system, and they follow, so you could use them in the same way you use the Hero Quest board, right? You decide
Yeah.
where the doors are and whatever and stuff. But then we realized we were sort of tapping more into the sort of classic RPG market. People were regular D&D players were using it, and they wanted things like furniture and doors
Of
as
course.
part of the scene, right? So then the maps
Yeah.
moved down. Our name, Heroic Maps, is a nod to Hero Quest.
Oh, okay.
That's where the name comes from. But
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
so that's and then it just became a full-time thing. I sort of gave up teaching. I love teaching. I really liked it. I never disliked teaching, but the chance to work at home and be self-employed and just make cool maps and stuff is was too much of a
no-brainer, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it was. So I was very lucky that and even with things like all the sort of AI crap, which it has like destroyed livelihoods for so many artists, right?
You're not a fan, are you?
And I'm not a fan at all. But it's encroaching into the RPG map thing, and it can't quite do it yet. I'm sure in the future, the tech bro arseholes will have managed to destroy another industry. But until that point, I'll keep making maps.
Well, I think people will always want, the artist to have created something, even, and the fact that they know who you are, and I'm sure you.
Yeah, no, I know.
Following with people, I can understand that. I mean, that's but it is. I'm sure it is a fear that it's in any creative situation. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm quite surprised that you're able to, maintain basically a career out of it, just making maps.
There was a really good surge. It was doing well, and then during the COVID lockdown sort of times, a huge number of people who are now at home during lockdowns and things started playing D&D on VTTs like Roll20 and Foundry and those sort of things. And so you had this surge of people who wanted then digital maps to use in their games, right? So whereas in person you might be happy with a graph paper and you just or whatever, but people playing on VTTs wanted the actual JPEG, the actual maps. So that led to a big surge in things, and really at the same time, D&D has had a resurgence. Obviously, at the film a few years ago, they sort of brought out more books, and they are on a kind of an up. And things like Critical Role and other sort of actual play podcast things have promoted it. Stranger Things featured it a lot. People heard of it more. There are a huge number of players now, and
most of them ever has been. I think, haven't they? Even when it was exciting.
Absolutely, it's huge. Like there's so many. It's massive now. And so there's enough customer base to.
And I guess as well with the RPG world anyway, you can just turn your hand to any other role-playing game that's out there.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we do some maps that are based around D&D IP stuff. So like the adventures like Phandelver and Candlekeep Mysteries and things. We do maps for those particular things, which go on DM's Guild. But we also do maps that anyone can use for anything. If you whatever RPG you're playing, sci-fi ones as well. We do sci-fi as well. So
brilliant. That's fantastic. But then that's kind of like your background in creation and in that kind of thing, and your art obviously is something that you're talented at doing anyway. So I mean, did that create? You said you went to, was it Oozing Lard? Was the first?
Oozing Lard was my first Lard day. Then I first pushed in,
and that was a trigger for really starting the whole big.
Thing.
And what was the game that you did there, and what was?
I did Dead Man's Corner, which was
I remember.
So, because I wanted Normandy's such a classic location for
it is,
table,
isn't it?
Right? That's why I think there was a really good article from Nick Skinner in WSS. Maybe 6 months ago or something, where he talked about Normandy being the wargamers. Safe space, kind of like it's as in like it's everyone feels comfortable. They know the campaign, right? You haven't got to have any background. You know the campaign, you know the location and the combatants. You know some of the main names of the towns and whatever and stuff, right? And the landscape is immediately recognizable and familiar, right? The little Normandy farmhouses and the bocage and the little lanes. It's like got this, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd do a Normandy thing, and I was keen to do a thing with 101st because that's a great unit to roleplay, sort of like play through with. And then I picked Dead Man's Corner because the causeway from Dead Man's Corner up to Saint Comte-de-Mon, which ultimately runs down to Carentan, is a really good linear feature for a table. It's got the Dead Man's Corner at one end with the famous thing with the dead Stuart tank, and then orchards and whatever up into the town. So it was a very nice, visually had like town elements, a church, the edge of the town, orchards down to the countryside. So it was an attractive thing. So I did that. That was like a 5 foot by 14, I think, foot table, and that went to Salute that same the following year because it's the following year, that was my first like big table. It was nice.
How did the players enjoy it? I mean, when you were playing,
they really liked it. It was actually really good fun. So it was a 4-player game. We had the 2 American players. One of them was being, I forget which unit it was now, but pushing down towards Dead Man's Corner, the 101st, but pushing towards Dead Man's Corner, supported by these couple of Stuarts. And the other American player was coming into Saint-Condamon, which in Band of Brothers, the episode of Crossroads, which is the Carentan episode, right?
Yeah.
So that initial row when they're coming down and they've got the ditches and they all take cover in the ditches as they go in, that's technically Saint-Condamon they're going towards, not Carentan at this point. They approach Carentan later on, but that represents that part of the battle. So I had the American player on the other side coming down into Saint-Condamon there. And then the town itself was defended by like grenadiers, and then Dead Man's Corner area was Fallschirmjäger. And so you had these sort of different objectives for the 2 sides. What was nice though was the table was very linear. It had this like long causeway down the middle, and it meant that support weapons were, able to like fire hold down the table. Right. So there was one point where this American player was crossing. He had cleared all the things near him. Right. He had pinned these Germans that were in the house and everything, and he made this dash with like a whole squad across this road. He didn't realize that about 9 foot away was a half track with an AA gun on the back in the road, overwatching down the road, right? And they disappeared, right? It was good. So it was fun to actually have then.
That's that hot table artillery, isn't it? Almost in
it was brutal. Right? I also modified the jump off slightly to give them a shared jump off point that was between the 2 sections, so that you could have the 2 players support each other, so it didn't just turn into like 2 isolated games on a big table. Sort of like,
that could be an issue, couldn't it? If you just like got one player versus one player across the table. That's sometimes how you can get sometimes with multiplayer games, isn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely. But I mean, I think is that I sort of use that to an advantage though. When I ran out of Salute, because where you were helping at that game, because there you had people dropping into games, so it was hard to have it treated like one big game. So we sort of broke it into 3 separate games, essentially. So that one area could finish their game up and go without affecting the entire table. So that a big table there was handy with that. That was.
It has its places in it, but sometimes, like you say, when you've got people dropping in and out like a Salute, people don't want to be spending all day playing a single game, do they? But well, having said that, I mean, I think when I was helping you, there was a couple of lads who were playing for about 2 hours. And I'm going to go and film this. I can't.
Those guys, they didn't want to go. They really enjoyed it.
But they were enjoying it.
Since then, when I've done like Salute or Warfare, I've actually shifted to running Water Tanker on the big tables, because that very much lends itself to drop in, drop out games, and you can, like at Warfare back in November, I was running 8-player Stalingrad Water Tanker, and what was really handy was like people could drop in, they could play for 10 minutes if they're very unlucky, just 2 minutes, and then whenever they wanted to go, drop out. There was no holding tanks off table now, or someone takes over. It was good. So I switched to that because we got through maybe about 100 players over the course of the weekend, which was mad because it's a 2-day event, Warfare. That was really good to have that many people have a chance to, if people like passing by and I could say to them.
And I guess the good thing about it is you can play the game with 2 people, or you can play it with 20 people.
Exactly. So when the show first opens in the morning, and people are sort of wandering around. They're like, oh, I might do shopping first and stuff. If you're having to say, well, I can't start until I've got 6 players here, please sit down until. But you see like 2 mates walk past, and you say to them, you 2 can play each other.
Yeah.
And they can start playing. And when someone else wants to join in, now there's 3 tanks, now there's 4 tanks, and it builds up, and it works. It works really well for.
And I think that also works as well for drawing in other people as well, doesn't it? If you can see 2 people already playing.
Exactly. Yeah. If it's empty, or they're just sitting there waiting, checking their watches, hoping that someone else comes past.
It works on so many different levels. I think that, and it did work. I mean, I helped you there with Salute as well on that one.
Yes.
And everybody was having a great laugh with it.
Yeah.
And that's what a tanker anyway. I mean, it's
a great game. It's really good. It's really good. But yeah, it was funny. Actually, in at Warfare, there was on one of the days, this guy was like, "Can I drive through this ruined building?" I said, "Well, you can." I said, "But there's a chance that it might collapse on you or whatever, right? There's a roll table for that." He went, "No, I'll take the risk. I'll take the risk." Right. So he started to go through it. And he rolled like a 6 or whatever, and it meant that he hit a hidden cellar. The floor collapses, and his tank's gone. Right? I was like, "Oh, you're at the game." He's like, "Oh, okay, thanks." Right? He went off. Someone took his place, and he was like in the same area, and he went, "I'm going to go through a building." I said, "I warn you, the last person here fell through a cellar." He went, "Oh, I'll do it." He also fell through a cellar. That same cellar, claimed 4 tanks over the weekend. Right? People like going, "I'll go through this cellar," and they all roll 6s. And like, well,
did he get a Panzer stripe on its arm for each one of them?
Number of kills. I mean, there'd be so many tanks that you wouldn't fall. You just drive over them now. You'd be all right. Just fill up the cellar with tanks. But,
yeah, it's full of tanks. Brilliant.
Don't worry, the cellar's all right now.
So right, let's go back to when you've got an idea for a table. You've got an idea. You've got a show that's coming up. It might be a Too Far Laddies Day. It could be Salute or Warfare. So, what's the main steps then you take for creating that table? I mean, where do you start? You've got basically a blank piece of paper here.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll use as an example my current table, which is I'm doing Operation Charnwood, Khan 44, and I'm doing.
Normandy again. You do surprise
me. Normandy again, but different, fully urban, right? So bang in the middle of Caen. So that started with, I think it was a conversation with Tom Egan, and he had said something about, "Oh, you should do Caen," as a joke, and I was like, "I will do Caen," right? And so the first thing I did was, I was basing it on a historical action. Was I got up an aerial photograph of Caen just pre-bombardment. There was an aerial photograph in May 44, and I looked for an area that was visually interesting for a table, that wouldn't be, that would make a good game, but also saw action to some degree, right? And so what I initially did was I avoided this big church, right? There's a big church in Normandy, in Caen, called Saint Pierre, and I thought, I won't do that because this is a massive church. I won't do that. So I put my first plan to the side. But then my daughter overheard, and she said, "Oh, you should make the church because that church you made before was nice." And I was like, "Oh, but it's going to be like a meter long, the church." She's like, no, you should make it. So I'm like, "Okay, I'll make it." So I bumped my table across to include this massive church now. So first thing I did was I chose the area of Caen I wanted to do. The next thing to do was to essentially decide on like the vibe I was going for, the feel I wanted to convey with the table. So during Charnwood, by this point, Caen has been bombed to crap. Right, so North Caen gets absolutely destroyed by the RAF and the Royal Canadian Air Force, and HMS Rodney is shooting shells as well. So by this point, by the 8th of July, the city is in a bad way. But in the same way, like whenever you look at a ruined place, there's also pockets where it's not ruined because bombs don't hit everywhere, right? And I wanted to have that contrast of, here are some areas that are untouched Normandy buildings and sort of town things. and then here's areas of utter destruction and rubble that's blocking the roads and things. So I sort of found some photographs of things that I thought these are good inspirational pictures of the sort of things I want to get. Some of them weren't even in Caen. So there was I used pictures of Saint Lo, which was also heavily bombed. Was quite inspiring for seeing pictures of ruined buildings of how those things sort of look when they're destroyed. And then I made a big list of everything I need for it. So it involved a new mat for the table to go on. It involved like structures I'd need to build that are intact buildings, ruined buildings, a big box of scatter rubble, decorative scatter things like gardens and statues and hand carts and old cars and stuff, and then this massive church. And then I essentially then decided whether I was going to scratch build things, if I was going to take MDF kits and modify them, or take 3D prints and modify them. And then I sort of just dove into it. So I picked the first thing I did. So I got on to Paul Edwards, who is his company is Sabotage 3D, and he's like the 3D printing genie that literally every wargamer uses for everything now, right? Yeah, someone goes, "Oh, that's a good 3D printed thing." Who did that? Paul. Yeah, Paul did that. Yeah.
So, he's got a lot of my money. That's Paul.
Yeah, yeah, right. I had to remortgage for Paul, but I knew that with the church particularly, that I can scratch build the church, but things like the Gothic windows and the sort of very fancy architectural features on the buttresses and those sort of things, I haven't got the energy to sculpt those things and stuff, and they'd be far too coarse and they would take away something from the design. So I sent him a text and I said, "Paul, are you busy?" And I gave him a photograph of like a document of all these different windows that the church had. I took screenshots and measurements and things, and I said, "Could you make these windows?" Obviously, the church, because being a medieval church, it's not standardized.
Yes,
like you get windows are different widths and different designs, and at some point the church actually has got a bend in it because of the nature of the landscape and things, right? So I didn't want to I need 18 different types of windows. I went, okay, I'll use this window for all the windows and stuff, or this one. Things. So he started doing those things and stuff, and while he was doing those, I got on with making the ruins and things. So they were a mix of scratch built things with some 3D print elements, like things like facades and windows and stuff that you could sort of stick on, or doorways and things. But then the bulk of it is built from polystyrene, like blue extruded foam covered in polyfiller. There were some 3D prints. Adam Bengston in Sweden, who has a company called Table Studios, he was very keen to design some ruiny bits as well. So he designed some lovely ruins, sent them over all the way from Sweden. They got stuck in customs for a month, but they eventually made it to me, and they were really cool. So I gave them my trademark skim of polyfiller, and painting them up and everything, and they're cool. So that was all building up as I was sort of going along, but I think a really important thing was, because obviously I built this table over the course of, where did I start it? October, like 5 months, I guess, right? I mean, like 5 months of work. And it was very important that, because I can't see the whole table until I set it up at a show, right? Because I've got a very small house. I can't even have the biggest table I have in the house is a 3x4, so I can't set up a full-size table. So I had to plan that the color palettes and the feel would be consistent. I don't want to set it up and go, "Oh, all buildings will jar with each other. They all look wrong with each other." Because if you look at Normandy, obviously you have exceptions where there are odd buildings that don't quite fit the thing, but generally they have the same sort of roofing materials, and if they weather, they weather to similar sort of colors. Once you've got a roof that's got lichen and moss and water stains and streaks and bird crap, they have the same sort of color palette as each other, right? So you get largely slate roofs or sometimes tar roofs, but they have a certain vibe. And then Normandy stone, Caen stone, is a particular limestone that most of the buildings are built from. And if they're not built from that, they're faced in that, and so then that has a certain color palette to it as well. And so I do this all my tables. I limit myself to a smallish, finite selection of colors for rooftops and for the buildings, and I desaturate them more than they are on the paint tin sort of thing, right? Because that's the sort of scale model effect of when you see a model of something, if it's the full color, like it looks wrong, it needs to be lightened even. And me not know words, lightened and
you repeat the word,
yeah,
you got fired, you didn't leave.
to look right, So I think on my whole Caen table, all the buildings are one of 4 colors.
Okay.
And that's it. They're all like combinations of those things. The colors, if you're interested, are carrot stone. I use that a lot. That's a Citadel Games Workshop paint.
Okay.
They have one called Morghast bone,
right,
which is like a bone color. And then I use the Revel Aqua range of acrylics. They have an ochre, and they have like a sort of sandy beige. They got 2 beige colors. One's called beige, some number. The other one's called beige, a different number. It's the other one, the different number one.
Right.
Anyway, it's more of a one of the beiges is like a whiter beige, and the other one's like a creamier buffer sort of one. But anyway, that color. So that's my color palette for all the buildings, right? So all the buildings are in combinations of those, and they've all been given a wash of Flory, which grimes them up and settles it, and then they all are highlighted.
Just explain to people what Flory washes are, because I know what they are.
So Flory is a company that makes washes and pigments for scale models, and they have a range of clay washes, which are basically just clay minerals with pigments and water and a flow agent. What's good about them is they are totally non-shiny, totally matte. They mute colors in a really nice way. They're water based, and they don't dry permanently if you reactivate them water. So you can put them on anywhere, and then you can remove excess, and you can with a damp cloth or whatever. You can also just paint over that. You can just paint over the thing, and that also affects the color you're painting because it reactivates it slightly, so that helps to soften the colors. So I go through gallons of Flory wash, 10 bottles please, and so that's
number one customer, I bet.
I probably am, right? I probably am. And whenever I mention, I'm sure whenever I mention it in a magazine, and I go, oh yes, I then use Flory wash, right? Flory gets an order of why is everybody in search of Flories? So I use that, and then I highlight in the base color again with a little bit of like lighten slightly. But not with white. I lighten it with beige. I want to keep the colors with the warmth to them.
White is very stark, isn't it? That's
white does the wrong thing. Does the wrong thing to the colors, especially because part of it as well is a bit of science now. Is when you look at dusty things, right? Because most dust has particle size of the same sort of particle size to make it dust. Otherwise, it's not dust. They all scatter light in a similar way, so you get the sort of same diffuse scattering, which gives you the dusty look, right? And the dusty look is not white; it's always a sort of grey cream kind of edge to things, right? So don't highlight buildings in white. Highlight them in a slightly lightened with a creamy sort of color. And that's a far more natural stone look than just pure white.
Well, that's a good tip for
top
viewers.
Top tip there. And then I was over time I was building up all these buildings, right? Intact buildings and ruined buildings, and then I started putting together rubble, which is super important for any table that's got ruins and stuff, right? And I always use I
the
use.
amount of tables that you see where everybody's cleaned up after themselves.
I know. It's very good soldiers. Like, yes, before we attack, lads, let's shoot these floors. But what I do is I do a mix of I put some rubble onto the model as a fixed thing, but not much, right? Because I want to, show that it's a ruined building. So I'll glue some in place, but not in places where it's going to be annoying to place a mini. So people want to put the machine gun teams at the windows, right? So I don't want to block the windows by having all this stuff. So I do it in corners or bits where rubble sort of piles up and things, and that gets fixed in place and is part of the model and painted and stuff. But the bulk of my rubble is loose scatter, because that way it falls more naturally. You can shift it if it's in the way of a vehicle or a mini, sort of thing. You can put it on top of things, and you can blend things into each other. And so what I've got is I now have two big tubs of rubble. The first one is a brick based rubble, which is good for industrial stuff. So it contains a lot of like granulated cork and bits of wood and like plastic pipes and girders and that sort of angular stuff. But Normandy rubble is different because the buildings they're not brick buildings. They're all big limestone and sandstone buildings. And so I started researching how I could make that rubble, right? And it was quite interesting because part of it is you sort of look at the commercial products that are available. I'm not going to name any names, right? Some companies sell wargaming basing materials or those sort of things for a little tiny pot for £5. I mean, for example, and I will name them, Woodland Scenics, right? In Hobbycraft, they sell bags of sticks, right? That are literally just sticks for like £11, right? And they call it like dynamic basing sticks or something, right? It's just some sticks. So what I did was I was like researching, well, what makes where can I find sort of good rubbly things that are the right color palette and material for looking like limestone? And I found a company, a war games company, that was selling little tubs of this stuff, and they called it rubble or scree or something. And I was like, what is that really though? Like, because like they've obviously found some existing material and they've gone, we could package this into little tubs and sell it, right? Like, what are they? Is it actually really being sold? So I did a lot of research and managed to work out what it actually was. And in one of the examples, it was like rolled pumice that was sold for like flower arranging type people, right? And you can buy like 10 liters.
You stick flowers into
it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like high drainage. You mix it in. I think you mix it in with the soil as well to help it drain. And they use it for succulents and things that want good drainage or whatever. So it's a natural material. It's pumice. It's been treated in a certain way, like rolled and sort of ground into pellet size things. But you could buy 10 liters for like £8, right? And so once I realized what it was, I could buy some without having to, because I want a lot of it, right? I want a big tub of it, sort of thing. So it was quite interesting to see commercial products and think, well, what is this really that they're repackaging? But what's the actual thing? So my rubble mix consists of this pumice stuff. It consists of a special type of cat litter that is a clay-based cat litter, which is unscented and is basically just lumps of clay, like hard clay, which has the same colors as limestone. I bought a load of micro mosaic tiles in like tiny little cubes of limestone from a mosaic company, because that looks like then when you've had like a nice building destroyed and you get lumps of dressed stone that have fallen.
Of course.
Those mixed in with that.
Not everything is smashed to pieces, is it? You're still going to
get... no, it's quite hard, right? Actually, buildings are pretty tough, and the stone is tough, and it all collapses, but enough will survive that you can go, that's
you can pick things out.
So it's that, and I also got some more granulated cork at like 8mm pieces,
right?
And that's quite hit or miss because the companies that sell it, they have different, the color isn't consistent. So
Right.
Some cork is quite red, and that makes great brick rubble. And I had to get a sample pot from this company to make sure that it was, because on the website it looked like a beige color, and it was, the other one was beige, so I was fine with that. So that's the sort of bulk mix. And then doing crafting, I just have this tub under the table, and any loose bits of interesting things, like bits of MDF sprues and scraps of cocktail sticks and lollipop sticks and whatever I've got, I just chuck in this tub, and that gets, if it's too clean looking, I mix it in with a little bit of diluted paint and let it dry.
Okay.
Just to
I was going to
take
ask you,
the edge off.
things like like the girders and stuff you mentioned, the pipes. Do you paint those then before they?
Yeah, well, the girders and the pipes, I put them all into a big bucket, and I got some grey emulsion, and I just stirred it all around, and then put on some washing up gloves, and when it was dry, dipped my hands. This is very artistic. Dipped my hands into like grey paint, did the war paint, and then picked up these things and basically just right, and it put enough bits of paint onto certain areas, and then I got some, what's it called? It's a Games Workshop Riser Rust or Rizza Rust. It's one of the like dry orangey rust colors, and got that, and I put that on my hands as well. All right, and then went on that, and that put little random specks of orangey rusty colors into that, right? And that was enough, and that just those sort of colors and those bits of highlights and those sort of stains and stuff was enough to say this is old metal that has been painted or chipped or rusted or burnt or whatever. And when that's all mixed into a big rubble box thing, which often is dusty anyway, and the dust sticks to these things, and it all sort of like homogenizes the colors and things. When you put that on the table, it just says, the viewer's brain says, this is a ruined factory, or this is a ruined church, or whatever. This is the stuff you expect. And so having the color palette feel like it's right, like you want to avoid, if you can, using like orangey brick rubble for Normandy buildings, because if the buildings aren't orangey brick, where did that rubble come from? So that sort of jars a bit, and if you want to get people into it more, you want to sort of make it feel like this could have been a building, this could be rubble from a building that could have existed in this place,
So really, I mean, I'm picking up, what you're saying there is you're kind of tying in everything together, not just the color palette of the buildings, but also the things.
Yeah, I think as well. Like also, you want to tie even as well. You want to sort of tie in like the story of the place, the sort of narrative of the place you're modeling. Buildings and things don't exist in isolation. They are part of the landscape. They have garden walls, and they have fences, and they have crap outside, and boxes and hedges, and then the trees have things near them, and there's an old fence over the tree. Like there's, these things are real places, are messy, chaotic places that fit together. And you could look at any street and you could work out a story, even if the story is like a boring story, like oh yeah, they built a garden to this house. That's the story. There's a story. This house is a garden, and there's a wall around it, and at some point there's a ladder there. At some point the guy got a ladder and he's put it down in the garden. It's still there, right? That's the story. That's the story there. And then you have bigger stories of how the town might have grown. If you're doing like a fictional table, but like based on a real area, how has this town grown? What's happened here? Well, there's the farmer. The farmer's over there. What's the farmer going to have? Well, the farmer needs to have these buildings. It will have a yard, and have these things and stuff. How does he get to his fields? Well, there's a fence, a gate through the field. Like that level of story as well. And you want to. I think I sort of said before to people who ask about like when they're sort of going, oh, the scattered terrain and those sort of bits and things and stuff, is I think part of it is like as a person that exists on Earth, and you walk around Earth and you see things without really realizing what you're seeing, what your environment looks like, which is why you can spot when things are out of place, when things jar, right? So without realizing it, without maybe able to list, maybe you can't list what features a town has, but you know what a town has without having to, and if it's missing, if you suddenly realize you're walking down the street and you suddenly realized that every single house didn't have a front door, right? You'd be like, this is really weird. What's this weird street where no one's got front doors, right? Or if you went down the street and there were no lampposts, you'd be like, this is, when you notice it, you'd be like, oh, this is a weird street. Why are there no lampposts on the street? And so I think a good thing to do to build the immersion into these tables is to try and think of things that real places have, because then if someone looks at your table and sees these things are present, it gets them into where this place is. It doesn't jar with things, So you want to, when you're making a table, you want to sort of think what should be here, small scale things, what should be here to make this feel like a real place, and how do these elements interact with each other to feel like a real place. You don't have a house just in a field on its own, right? It will have a path going to it. It will have gardens, outbuildings, and hedges and stuff. And no one does. Yeah, exactly. Right. No one just puts a house just randomly in a field on its own, right?
Well, if they do, and they are very occasional, they do look weird, don't they?
They do look weird. But even then, you still have you have a path to it, right? You have a path to it. You'll have some evidence that this building has had an impact on its landscape, in that sort of way. Or you have a field, you might, fence off an area, but why is it fenced off? Who's gone to the effort of fencing off something unless it's for a reason? Are there animals in there? Is it a yard or whatever? Is there no gate into this fenced off thing? Why they built it? So those little details, people will then look at your table, and yourself looking at it, you sort of feel the story more of those places, and you notice it when it's not there.
I was going to say, I think that's one of the big things. I mean, we were playing Chain of Command last night myself and Dex, and I just put some fences around a house, and it just, like you say, just adds that little bit, and it's only a tiny little touch, isn't it? And it, you're breaking up the shape of not only the house itself, but also how that land is being used.
Exactly. Exactly. All that little stuff. The scatter and things, the sort of scattering pieces, and the little, the little elements of those things, the little parked car and crates and stuff. That's all really, really useful stuff for telling the story of a place. Yeah.
So then that kind of leads in, I guess. You kind of give some hints and tips for people who are just starting out doing scenery, or what are the easy ways into creating a nice looking table, I guess. And you mentioned scatter and things. That's
I think a big determining factor is starting off by deciding what you're going to use as your matte surface, or that you're going to build on, right? So for me, I use, for most of my tables that are non fully urban tables, I use a big teddy fur mat. So I went to a haberdashery and I got a big 15-16 foot sheet of teddy bear fur in a sort of oatmeal color, and I shaved it with dog hair shaving trimmer things, and then
your neighbours must think you're a lunatic.
Oh, I know. What's he doing? And so I shaved that. It was, a top tip there is don't ever shake it in the house, because it's stuff everywhere. Anyway, so
that's the voice of experience.
Oh man, I did it right. I'd shaved about a meter of it, and I started off in the house, right, and I was like, I gathered up the loose stuff, right. I thought, that's it. So I gave it a little shake. As a cloud of tiny bits, everything was covered in the stuff. Right? I was like, right. So I did one of those, shaved that, and then I painted it with household emulsions. So I went in the garden on a hot sunny day, and I took one of those. They're pressurized spray bottles for using in the garden for spraying pesticides and stuff. Yeah. Right. So I filled that with diluted green emulsion and a bit of washing up liquid to break the surface tension, because you're going to, obviously the teddy bear fur is a plastic based fiber. You want it to flow into it. And then I went out and I sprayed that with this diluted emulsion, and I used 2 or 3 different shades of green, and allowed bits for the color to be quite weak, so it looked like more dead grass, and then stronger bits and whatever and stuff. And that all dried in one day. It was a hot day, and I wasn't using huge amounts of paint. And that dried it. So that's my base table there. So if you're starting out on a new thing, decide what you're going to use. You might want to use a printed mat. There's so many printed mats that exist. You might want to use teddy bear fur. You might want to get like a fleece, like Dunelm sell big old green fleece that is quite a decent color as a sort of base start point, because that mat is going to determine your color palette for future things, right? So when you're then putting flock around the base of a hedge or a tree or a fence or whatever, the color of your mat is going to determine what looks well together, right? So get your mat, even if you don't make the mat straight away or buy it straight away, have in mind what you're going to use. Especially keeping in mind as well, though, that things like printed mats, especially if they're on like vinyl things or if they are on a smooth fabric, in certain angles they're very reflective, and because your trees and buildings will not be reflective and the mat is reflective, at certain angles it makes quite a disconnect between the buildings and the mat. So companies that print onto like fleeces do a better job with that, because the sort of nature of the surface scatters the light more, so you get less reflection.
More science,
more science.
Wargaming, stay for the science.
But teddy bear fur, no reflections. All right, so it's obviously some, you couldn't see it, so it'd be invisible. But so you get your mat, that determines your color palette. I think then a good thing to do is to start with landscape things, right? So unless you're doing fully urban, you will have natural elements on your table. So even though even fully urban, you still have plants, but you could, less so. And so you go, okay, well, what do I need? I need a road of some sort, because all of Europe has roads, right? And so you need a road. And so I use latex roads from either early war miniatures or latex roads from Total Battle miniatures. They are super great stuff, and they're flexible, and they paint up with the household emulsions really nicely and everything and stuff. So get some roads, and then do things like hedges, walls, and trees, right? Now, if you never build a building, that will give you enough stuff to do a huge number of games, right? For hedges, you can use on one level, you could use like a welcome mat cut up and then glued onto it like green turf, like woodland phoenix coarse turf. Or you could use rubberized horsehair or rubberized coconut glued onto a base, sprayed brown, and then use PVA to glue on the turf with that. And then walls, you could make the walls yourself. You could make them from, you could, if you wanted to, if you were like a masochist, you could glue gravel together, right, into like your very own little wall. Or you could you buy like, get some like polystyrene, right? Blue polystyrene, like extruded polystyrene, and you could either use a pen to engrave a stone pattern onto it. If you do that, make sure that you don't use aerosols on it, because it'll dissolve. More science, it'll dissolve it. So either what you can do, if you're going to do that, either give it a coating of PVA first, or a coating of diluted polyfiller, like mixed up from water polyfiller. Because that then protects it. It also gives you a stone texture, which is a better texture for future painting. It gives the sort of like right reflections. You can buy walls as well. You could buy resin walls, like Debris of War do really nice walls for things. Paul Edwards will print you really nice walls.
He won't thank you for pushing customers over to him.
He'll be like, "Well, what are you doing? I'm too busy. Why are you making me buy my stuff, bastard?" So walls and things, hedges, and then trees. I use a mixture of trees. I either buy super cheap crap ones from China. You can buy a billion trees for 10p kind of thing, right? If a good one, as a recommendation, if you search for mulberry tree on eBay, right? So from these like cheap shipments from China, sort of thing. But the mulberry tree ones have a really good shape for beech and oak if you're trying to model European trees. And so I get those cheap trees. I glue them onto a base and put some PVA and sand on the base or whatever and stuff, a bit polyfur and things. And then I spray the whole thing brown using Army Painter leather brown, because it's kind of a primer paint, and it's kind of rubbery, and it actually is really good at masking the awful colors that those trees come in. They come in like fluorescent mutant green, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing gets sprayed brown. That seals in the existing flock that's on there and everything. It all binds it together. And then I put loads of PVA on it, neat PVA and coarse turf, and then seal it with PVA as well. Or I make the trees using like plastic armatures, and then I use rubberized horsehair and then do the turf, right? So if you were
as a starting point, I have some Joe Bilton trees in my collection, don't I?
Yes, and they were done with the horsehair version, right?
Yeah.
So if you wanted as a core set, if you wanted to do a core set of something, having the mat, hedges and walls and some trees, and that's the core stuff you need for most European wargaming areas, right? And then what you want to do is you then essentially adding in the flavor of the location you're really modeling. So then it's like, okay, well, I'm doing, let's say you wanted to do, North America for War of Independence or whatever. Okay, well, what features are unique to this that if you see them, you say, well, that's clearly a table set in here, right? So those snake fences, the sort of snake picket fences and things, right?
That's the thing I was thinking of immediately.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's it. If you see those, there's nowhere else. I think there's a similar one, I think, in like Sweden or something, like a related structure, which maybe even might imply that the Americans got it from settlers from the area. Anyway, I'm not sure. But those fences, right?
This is a scenery, not history lesson.
Yeah, and science. And it's a full curriculum. Those fences really scream, Civil War, American Civil War, or whatever, right? So okay, add some of those, and that will instantly flavor your table towards that stuff. If you want to do Normandy, you're like, well, do you know what? Really, the bocage. I might make some thicker hedges, or I might have a big stone wall of like Normandy stone that sort of surrounds my orchard or something. Or Italy, okay, I'll do some poplar trees, or make some olive trees, or the walls here are, sort of lower flags, lower sort of like field walls and things. So work out what it is that, because if I showed you a picture of some landscape in Europe and said, where do you reckon this might be? You'd be able to pick out some feature which you say, well, that tells me it must be in Russia or it must be in Germany or whatever, right? And that's what you want to do.
Get it like at least north or south.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Even if you can't like, in a real like GeoGuessr pinpoint road, right?
You watch those videos as well, do you?
Yeah, they're good, right? He's very impressive. But you would know roughly where it is, right? You would know this is a Mediterranean area. This is Italy, Sicily, South France, or whatever. No, this is Baltic. This is America. This is Russia. Like you see enough stuff, and so adding those little elements to your table will flavor your table towards that area. In fact, I saw your pictures on Twitter today of your Italy game, right? And I was like, do you know what? Actually, that has inspired me, because I've always sort of put off doing Italy because I was like, I can't be bothered to make a new map that's South Italy and all that. But actually, North Italy, right, looks like France, but it's got poplar trees, vineyards, and Pantar rooftops, and that's it, right? That's it.
There's very little difference. Very little difference. Yeah,
the fields are the same, the trees are basically the same, but you put in the poplar trees. And you put in a field of olive trees, and if the rooftops, if the buildings are cream stuccoed plaster buildings with Pantar rooftops, that's Italy. Done. Right?
Yeah.
So I've added to my plans for at some point.
That's the one thing I'm missing is poplar trees. I did have some, but I used to line the roads with them for my Italy tables. And again, like you say, it just really suddenly becomes Italy, doesn't it? It's
exactly.
Like,
exactly.
A row of trees down the side of a hill of a road, and there
absolutely. And it's that, right? It switches it into that route, into that place. Like my next table after I finished Caen, I'm doing Netherlands. My plan is to do 30 core club root, like sort of like that sort of part, and there. So the bulk of that table will be my existing collection. The teddy fur mat is the same mat. The roads will be the same. A lot of the gardens and bits and allotments, and that's all the same stuff. But recognizing, okay, well, what really stands out as uniquely Dutch? Well, having like the sort of drainage ditches, polder sort of stuff, right? So some sort of ditch waterway system thing is important for that. The buildings are distinctly different to North France and Belgium. They just you go into Netherlands and they just switch. You're like, oh, now these are different buildings, right? Having those, and then a windmill, right? A Dutch windmill instantly says this is Netherlands, right? And so exactly, it sets it, right? So and so I've basically got for my sort of standards quite a short list of things that need doing to make a Netherlands table. Waterway things, a raised road, a few houses, and a windmill, and that's enough to shift the table into that. So I think as well, like, it's quite important as well. People have finite storage for these things.
Yes.
If you can find a way to just add little bits to its existing collection, that means that now works for different things. Like I've made a huge amount of ruins for my Normandy Caen table, right? Like boxes and boxes and boxes of ruins, and I made a conscious choice to only have about a quarter of them be distinctly Norman, right? So that have like a French poster on the wall, or those sort of things that really stand out as French or Normandy. Other ruins are generic Northwest European ruins that look like any Northwest European town. And so then when I want to do, say, Germany, a ruined city in Germany, all I need to do is switch out the quarter of Normandy stuff and bring in a quarter of distinct looking, right? So then that will switch it to be, then that is enough for you to see it and go, this is Germany now. Oh, that's a sort of color palette of a German building. These facades, that's how they look in Germany. They got the roof tiles, orange roof tiles. That's Germany, and that's enough to flag up this table to anyone watching it that this is this landscape. You're sort of picking out the features that that you expect to see in those places.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Like you say, it's that it's tricking the eye almost, isn't it? Of the observer.
It really is. And like, obviously part of it is like collapsing things down to stereotypes of landscapes and things, right? But like everyone playing the game knows it's not real, it's not really Caen, right? No one's gonna go, oh shit, how did you manage to bring Caen into this room? Oh, it's so small. I'm a giant. Like they're not gonna. They know it's not real. No one thinks it's real. But if you can put in the visual cues that they would expect to have seen if they were looking at the real city, and they go, oh, I know, I feel this. I know this place now, and it becomes familiar. And they apply what they already know about the real place to the table, and they get further into it. And so it's about providing colors and relationships that you expect to see in the real thing.
What I kind of think of your stuff is, and I don't want this to sound too bad, but it's like detailing without detailing, if you know what I mean. Because
it's actually quite messy, right? If you look up close, I am not a neat, like it's not neat painting, right? It's quite. I'm not going to say slapdash because down, I'll cry. But
that sounds like that sounds like you're not taking care of it.
Yeah. Well, I did describe how I just get gloves on and just go But I don't paint things like brick at a time sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's like broad sweep.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Right? It's like you're not picking out individual bricks.
Yeah, because the part of it is there's two reasons for that. I mean, one is that when you actually look at stuff in the world anyway, you are not seeing, if you look across at the window and see a building, you are not seeing neatly painted bricks, right? Like things are messy anyway. Like they're all different colors and weathering things and oddities and crappiness and stuff, right? Plus you're seeing it you see like a blended version of the whole thing. You're not looking at one brick and going, oh, here's this perfectly painted brick. You're not seeing that. And there was quite a good lesson I had when I was making Il2 skins years ago. I made them when I was about 16, 17 years old, right? So and I approached it first of all with a really methodical approach. So I used to draw the panel lines for the aircraft like perfectly accurately, very neat 1 pixel lines or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I would really carefully do the placement of the colors, and it was all very neat and everything, right? And they looked nice, but they were very like neat and precise things. And there was this other guy who made skins called Compans. That was his like username, Compans.
Yeah.
And I found out at some later point that he was like an art teacher or something.
Okay.
And his skins, they look like pastel sketches. Right. So when you like open the bitmap file and looked at it close up, they weren't precise, right? The panel lines were like a suggestion of panel lines.
Right.
The color palettes they blended and they mashed together, but when you saw them used in the game, they were like photographs, right? They were the best. They were absolutely brilliant textures. But you wouldn't have thought it by looking up. You were like, what's this mess, right? But that's the thing, you know, when you look at a real plane, you don't see the panel lines standing out starkly as these highlighted panel lines, right? They sort of blend. You might see a suggestion. You might see how they affect the ribbing on the plane might affect how the light shines on the fuselage and stuff. And that you see that, but you're seeing the effect of those things. You're not seeing precise. Here's a rivet. Here's a highlight and stuff. And I think it's quite a good thing for me seeing that, guys.
I said your brain is filling that stuff in anyway, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You're seeing these visual cues, and your brain is determining the volume of that object and the surface and everything, right? So seeing his messy artwork, which was so well done, like it was like, well, this is how it looks. It feels like a real thing. Pushed me to go, well, what's more important actually is it feeling like the thing, right? The precision isn't needed in that way. So when I'm painting a building, I will, you know, put on the base colors neatly enough, but not much. And if a bit of color bleeds over something else, all right, no big deal. It doesn't matter. You know, I'll do the window frames in this lighter color, but if I miss a bit, or if it's that's all right, doesn't matter, because most window frames are not neatly done anyway.
I was going to say, look at the front
on, you highlight stuff.
There's paint splashes all down it and everything.
Exactly. But like, you know, from a point of view of like people themselves don't paint things very well. Right? Like real people painting their furniture, painting their houses really make messes. But also, then when you've got paint that's chipped, or there's a stain here, or the way the paint has come off this, or weathering and whatever and stuff. Things are all messy colors and random colors and stuff. And so I put on the base colors with a big broad brush, you know, like a sort of centimeter wide brush. There's the colors on. Here's my washes. Here's my highlights. And weathering streaks and stuff. But if you look close up, you're like, well, that's a bit. Oh, he's missed a bit there, or it's gone over the edge of that. But that doesn't matter, because you're not viewing it like that. You're viewing the scene. You're viewing the whole place. And what's more important is the aesthetic.
Again, your brain fills it in anyway.
It does.
You know what I mean? It's like when you're looking at it, when I'm looking at your layout, I know those things are supposed to be there, whether you've painted them in or not. They fill in automatically from your brain anyway. And as you say, the thing is, I think if you are too precise anyway, especially in the sizes that we're doing stuff in 28mm and 15mm, whatever, you know, if you are precise, that stands out more.
It does stand out. Yeah, it does stand out. You know, if you look at a real building, you don't see that sort of detail.
No.
From this, like the sort of distance, if you scale, you know, your viewpoint to what you're looking at the table, sort of thing. You're not seeing that sort of precise detail. You're seeing the overall blend of all those details.
Yeah.
And so I'll happily say my work is slapdash in that way, right?
Well, the approach may be, but the result is absolutely fantastic. It really is. I mean, like I say, I delight in seeing your pictures when you're putting them up on Blue Sky now, as everybody is over on, and I just think, and having played on some of those tables and taken part in some of those games has just been an absolute pleasure from my point of view, really. And I'm sure everybody who's had a go on them will probably say the same thing. Just the fact that they've had a go on one of those tables. Well, look, we've rattled on for over an hour, so I don't want to keep you any longer because I'm sure you've got some more scenery to do. You're giving some good tips and hints there, and I mean, I've picked some stuff up as well, just thinking about it, and thinking about some other bits and pieces that I can add to my my color palettes of scenery across my games as well. So, is there anything else you want to add, Joe, before we wrap up?
I say just experiment as well as like try different materials and different approaches, and if it's wrong, chuck it in the bin. Who cares, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Go to B&Q and look at materials and think, how could I use this? And just try stuff, because that's the techniques I've got. Some have come from seeing people inspirational things, but a lot of it's just like, I'll just try this stuff. Does this work? And doesn't work. No worries.
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Just don't be afraid to experiment. I think. Really?
Like you can test on like some scrap stuff first if you need to, right? If you're worried about like ruining a thing, just get some scrap material and try it out, and if you like it, go for it.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right. Well, we'll leave it to that, Joe. So thank you very much again for watching. Leave us some comments in the down in the comments below if you've enjoyed this, and let us know some terrain.
No comments if you haven't. I don't want to hear.
If you don't like his stuff, stay quiet. All right. Brilliant. Thanks a million, Joe. That is fun.
All right. Cheers.